Okay, now it's time to kick off and introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Steph, Senior Optimization Architect, and her topic is Reduce Data Costs Using Amazon S3 Storage Lens. Steph is one of the OG members of the FinOps Foundation and has been working in the space for 5+ years. She's currently a Senior Optimization Architect in the AWS Optics team, where she acts as a subject matter expert, guiding customers through ways to optimize their AWS spend or less spend, however spend you want to call it. Hi, Steph. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? I'm saying I'm good. I'm a little tired. I'm wearing my NY hat. I just got off a plane from New York a few hours ago this morning. So feeling it, but happy to be here. I'm so excited to be back on AWS Fest and kicking off this session, looking about storage, about S3 lens optimization. So this is a great free tool that AWS offers, and I'm going to walk through some practical examples of how you can actually use this tool when you go into the office tomorrow or when you log in next into your AWS account, so you can actually go in, find some optimizations and see how we do it with our customers. Before we start, as John mentioned, a bit of background, I've been working in the world of FinOps or cloud financial management for a good couple of years now, about 5 years, and generally look to help customers and be a bit of an advocate in terms of what it costs. So at the end, I will be sharing socials and things like that, and how to get in touch or how to find out more about some of the stuff that we do from the optics team. But let's get into S3 Lens. So S3 Lens is a great tool located in your S3 console, and it is an analytics tool which can be used to gain organization-wide visuals of your storage usage and activity. It's free. That's one of the best things about it to get started with. Or you can enable some paid metrics for a little bit more of a deeper insight, which I'll kind of touch on a bit later. So today we're going to walk through how to learn more about your AWS spend and where you can improve it. So again, looking at those practical recommendations. And I'm also going to be highlighting a lot of stuff that's in this blog. This is a great resource, and I will have some resources at the end to share. But that is something that kind of helps me a lot of the time figure out how to find some optimization opportunities. So at reInvent, we announced 34 additional metrics. So we're not going to go through all of those today. We'd be here all night, but it is something to look into. Before we start into that, I wanted to refresh everyone, and I think there'll be more talks on this later, about the kind of quick overview of different options in S3 in terms of storage, because I will be mentioning some of these. So in the left-hand side of this picture, we have our access within seconds storage. So this is kind of your warm storage. And as we go to the right, we kind of hit colder storage. So things take a little bit longer to access. So as we go colder, the prices go lower. And so especially when you know steady access patterns of objects in S3, you can take advantage of these lower tiers. But sometimes you don't know what's happening with your buckets. Maybe they're a little bit sporadic, and that's when you can use things like intelligent tiering to make a really big saving. And I'm going to showcase a couple of examples at the end of how customers have used these different tiers and saved a huge amount of money in terms of their S3 spend. Now, we don't have long in this session, and so I wanted to go through how to actually use the console. But to make things a little bit safer, a little bit easier, I've gone for a screenshot view with kind of targeted views, targeted sides of the kind of slide to show you how to use the console. So I won't be doing a live demo, but I will be showcasing the best ways of using the tool. So let's get into it. So with each of the screenshots, there will be a number for you to kind of focus on where I'm talking about in the screen to make it a little bit more obvious. Also, as John said, any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. If you've used it before, let us know. It'd be quite interesting to see if anyone's had any success from this tool. So how do you actually get into the dashboard for S3 Lens? So this is my S3 console, and on the left-hand side, we've got dashboards there, and there will be a default one in your account. So you can see my default account dashboard. That is in all of the individual linked accounts, so that you can go in there straight away and there is a dashboard waiting for you. Something to note, there is also, it's in Virginia every single time. This might kind of seem irrelevant to you if you work out of Virginia mostly. I, being in the UK, normally based out of Ireland, so a little different. And with some of my customers, this has been a bit of a kind of gotcha situation because they've restricted access to different regions. So they're only allowed to deploy in places like Ireland. So just for you, if you are looking to access this tool and you don't have access to Virginia, kind of raise that as a request maybe, but just something to look at, or you could deploy it in a different region and start a new dashboard. So I said that this was a per linked account dashboard, and the default one is, but you can create an organization view. So I really recommend doing that. If you have access to your management account, deploy an organizational dashboard. I've got the org one on the screen, which is the one we're going to use today. And this allows you to see across your entire organization. So kind of brings that all together. So if you are looking holistically, then that is a kind of good starting point. So once I click that blue hyperlink into my organization dashboard, it will take me into this view. And there are a couple of things I wanted to showcase. So first of all, you've got a couple of different tabs here: overview, storage class bucket, all different kind of focus points of how to show the data. So we start off always with the overview. Then it gives you a highlight summary. So you're going to see kind of your top metrics, top buckets. As you can see, this has 3 accounts. So again, this is my organization. So I'm looking across all of them. If you're on the default, it'll only be 1. And it will show you kind of how many active buckets you have, which is sometimes surprising. I mean, I have 3 accounts and I have 43 buckets. That's maybe a surprise to me. So it entices me to come and see a little bit more about this data. And then we have some metrics that are kind of similar to above, but give you a little bit more. So you can also see things like recommendations and change over time in these visuals. But we're all about optimizing today. So let's go into filter this metric by optimization. So I slightly changed it, and now I'm looking at optimization in that filter box, so cost optimization specifically. And as you can see, the things below have now changed. So I've got a bunch of different metric names that I'm focusing on. This is where cost optimization comes in with these, because these are some quick wins that you can go and look for today and make savings. And I'll tell you a story about how customers have done this recently at the end. So just to cover what these 3 things are, so non-current versions are multiple variants of the same object that have been kept over time, and then so that when if you accidentally delete it in a bucket, it will be auto kind of brought back. But if you have too many of these, then you are just using storage in S3 that you don't need. We also have delete markers. So that is when you have versioning enabled and you delete something, it leaves a marker there as a kind of that existed when you did it. And MPUs or multi-part uploads are when you upload a single file and you want to improve kind of throughput, it will break up the file and kind of upload it into pieces. This is often, we see a lot with customers who use things like Lambda functions to upload data to S3, and it kind of breaks it up into chunks. And what can happen is if something happens in that process of the upload, it gets disturbed, your internet goes down, the Lambda function fails and times out, then you still pay for those objects that have been partially uploaded in your console, and you can't actually see these. So these are a good thing that we want to kind of find and they're spending money on. So we want to clean those up. So there's a couple of things to look for. So how do I actually see what's going on? Well, if you look on my screen, something's happened. And recently I've had a massive spike in my non-current versions. So let's drill down into this. So what I've done is I've clicked on my buckets tab along that top section. And now I'm going to filter by the buckets that I want to look at. So I've gone in my multiple uploads. Sorry, I skipped the screen. And I've filtered by non-current uploads in the trends. So what that means now is I can see what buckets are causing the spend. And it's one bucket. It's this bucket that says business bucket penny. And so that's the sole cause of all of my non-current versions. So this is the one I want to focus on. And so what I can do now is go into that bucket and maybe set up a lifecycle policy to remove all my non-current versions. So that's kind of the quick win of it, is that you can see that these things are sitting in your accounts that you're spending money on, but you're not using. And you can use lifecycle policies to delete these things. So over time, they'll transition and just be removed. It's a very simple process to set up these lifecycle policies. If you have a look, just Google lifecycle policies. I haven't got a QR code today, unfortunately. But if you just Google it, and there'll be a box that you just tick, and it will move those to delete. We had a customer who did this and saved a nice chunk of saving, which I'll kind of show you a screenshot in a minute. But yeah, again, very simple, quick win. Check out the lifecycle policies. So while I'm on this bucket tab, maybe I want to see what else is going on. So I get this kind of high level snapshot of all of my buckets, or my top X amount of buckets. I've chosen top 10 buckets in the situation, so I can see them and rank them by size. So this is where you can maybe start to look for any trends or any naming conventions that could help you dive into this data a little more. So I can see 2 of my buckets are Athena named buckets. Now, I know because I made them, but a lot of times if I see the word Athena, what's normally happened is someone's created a bucket for their exports from Athena queries to be placed in. So when you run an Athena query, the export gets put into this bucket, and it kind of lives there forever in standard S3, which, as we know, is the more expensive tier. And so what you could do is use those lifecycle policies, like we mentioned, to delete those files, because after a certain amount of time, you won't be needing them. And this is one of those examples of a kind of steady access pattern that you could take advantage of and delete those files. Another one I wanted to highlight is logs. So we see a lot of customers create logging buckets, as you should. You want to make sure you're tracking everything in your accounts. But again, these files can get stored indefinitely, and you probably don't need to access them immediately. If you need to access them, you can wait a little bit of time, and so you can put them into a colder storage. So you can also use lifecycle policies to transition these into different storage classes. So maybe move them to something like infrequent access or Glacier, and you can save a large chunk of savings on this. So let's actually look at this CloudTrail bucket and see if I've done that work already, and see what kind of storage tier I'm doing. So if I go to the top, I can filter by bucket, and I pop on here. Then the filters at the top of the screen, you can say, I want to look at this specific bucket. So I've put in the bucket name that I want. And then if I go onto storage class, I can see what storage I have. And of course, what have I done? I've left everything as standard. All my logging is costing me the most amount of money, and I'm overspending on this account. So you can definitely move to colder storage with these kind of static sets of data that you no longer need, and it saves you from paying that extra money. The key thing is, if you are going to do this, please check with whoever is in charge of your logging. You don't want to have any SLAs broken by this. So make sure that you figure out if you need to keep the data at frequently accessed for maybe 6 months, and then you can move it colder and colder, but kind of double check with the owners of those buckets before you do it. Again, this is a good example of a static access pattern. So you can use things like infrequent access tier to do this. So talking of different tiers and different access patterns, I wanted to showcase one of the paid metrics that you can get. So as I said before, paid metrics is something that is optional, but one of them that you get is retrieval rate. And so we have this bubble dashboard that gets created, which is very cool. And so what you can do is, if you put it by retrieval rate, you start to see the sizing of buckets and how much they're actually used. So retrieval rate is downloaded bytes divided by total storage. And you can understand kind of if you're accessing this bucket daily. And so if you see that percentage go lower than 0, like my Athena buckets are, then no one's using those. So again, you're paying for that higher storage tier for no reason. And you could move those into a lower storage class. So this is like a nice little win that you can get from one of those paid metric examples. Coming up on time, so another thing just to mention is that you can get this overview tab of all your buckets. So maybe look for things like, are you surprised by any of the accounts spending the biggest amount of storage? Are you looking at any regions that you're surprised by, or even any buckets that you didn't even know existed or are spending a lot more money than you anticipated? So I wanted to go over just some quick success stories of customers who have done really well in terms of optimizing their storage. So to quickly run through these, we've had customers move into different storage tiers using those life cycles I mentioned. And as you can see in this data, their spend was going kind of down. This is Cost Explorer, but their usage is going up. So their kind of amount of gigabytes in S3 is quite constant, but their spend is going down because they're taking advantage of those different levels of storage. Another one, infrequent access, we didn't touch a lot on, but this is a really good example. Just wanted to showcase that these things do really work. So again, that kind of static access, static storage, but because of the different tiering, it's kind of moved through the pricing and gotten a lot cheaper. And finally, I mentioned the multi-part upload. So this customer kind of daily was spending a chunk of money that they didn't need to anymore. And by using those lifecycle policies to delete all those files, they saved about 60% on this. So what's next? What should you guys do? So first of all, go check out S3 Lens if you haven't already. You don't just have to use it for cost. You can use it for many other aspects like access control and performance. So have a look at that. If you want to look at it in S3 and maybe other detail, I'd recommend checking out the Cloud Intelligence dashboards. These are a really cool service that allow you to deep dive into cost and usage information about storage. So things like the KPI dashboard on here and the Kudos dashboard give you some really good insights into that. Here is a bunch of resources. I can always pop these in the chat if needed, but if you're watching video, take a screenshot. But yeah, Google is your friend with a lot of these policies. And finally, if you are interested, I have a weekly Twitch show called The Keys to AWS Optimization, where we talk all about subjects like S3 Lens and do demos on it and have specialist guests come on, like John, to talk all about optimization. All right, that is it. John, I think I'm bang on 15 minutes there.
And you do have a QR code. All right, there we go. My audio finally works. All right, so you do have a QR code. That's pretty cool. I like that. So everybody, before we actually ask Steph some of the questions that I've gathered from the chat, we have a poll. But can everybody do me a favor, drop any additional questions? Oh, I like the comments coming there. Somebody said, Steph, you're a rock star. So awesome. In fact, let's see how many emojis that we can get for each of our guests. Can you, everybody, go below, drop some emojis, give a thumbs up, hearts, clap. There's one here. I'm going to give, all right, thumbs up. And there's a party one. And what is this one? Oh, there's a wow one. All right, man. Wow. Look at those popping up. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Steph, there was a poll that we put out. It's, are you using S3 Lens? Now, 21.57%, yes, we're down to 2 digits on it, is yes. A bit of experimenting, 24.53%. And people are still taking this poll because the numbers are moving on me. Stop it. No, I'm just kidding. And then not yet at 55, 54, 53. Oh, my goodness. Anyway, we'll just say 53% of not using lenses. Now let's jump over to some of the questions that we have that I gathered from the chat. All right. So, Steph, one of the questions, actually, I had a question that I got on there. You were talking about metrics at reInvent. How many metrics were released at reInvent?
I think it's 34.
Can you name all 34?
No, I knew you were going to say that. I was like, I cannot.
All right.
But yeah,
all right,
that'll
no
be
problem.
a fun challenge.
Well, speaking of metrics, one of the questions asked is, you mentioned paid metrics. What do you recommend as a good approach to enabling these?
So I'll take off my screen share there. So I really recommend customers maybe try it a little bit. That sounds a bit of a random way of describing it, but say you have tons of accounts. Maybe you look at that last view I showed you where you have an account that has the most storage, or maybe a medium amount of storage that you have control over. Go into that account and enable it on your dashboard there, and then leave it for maybe a week to gather some data. Have a little look and see what that kind of retrieval rate is, or a month. And then you can disable it. So I think customers sometimes think with these paid metrics, the same for things like Compute Optimizer paid metrics or any other service, that if you enable it, that's it, you're paying for it forever. But we have seen a lot of success with customers who just enable it for maybe a month, kind of pay that fee to get that information, and then do the work afterwards, turn it off, and then they can come back to it later. So, and then again, some of our other customers, I was talking to someone on our team the other day, and their customers are spending quite a lot. They've enabled it for their entire organization, but they really see the value of having this analytical tool that's in their AWS account. So yeah, give it a try, and then you could always turn it off if you need to.
Steph, I got to tell you, we got a lot of feedback in the chat with regards to having Amazon S3 storage lens in this conversation. We have a little bit more in a future session coming up, but they're really appreciated the information that you're bringing them. And in fact, the information and the questions keep coming. What other data can you use with Amazon S3 lens?
So I always think about using it with Cur. So at the moment, there's no, that I know of, maybe someone's made it already, no native way of combining the two, but it is a really powerful set of data. So what you can do is if you have resource ID enabled in your cost and usage report, then remember we just looked at how much you were spending on those, the biggest storage on those accounts. You can kind of compare that with the cost and usage report or even Cost Explorer to kind of see the spend. Because in Storage Lens, there's only sizing kind of metrics. There's no pricing information. So just to make sure that's known.
Can you only access the data in the dashboard?
That's a good question. So so kind of links to my last one, you can export it. So you can export it in CSV or Parquet, and that means you can connect it to your cost and use report. So you can use that resource ID, which is the bucket name, to find out the exact costs, and that will give you a really powerful view of the data.
Okay. Another question is, do you know if this is available yet in GovCloud?
I do not. I don't work in GovCloud, so I'm not aware. But that's a kind of unintentional plug. Next season of my Twitch show, I'm having someone on who works specifically around GovCloud and cost optimization. So this isn't a pre-planned question, by the way, because that's quite good. That's very lucky. Bryce Dickens is coming on, so next season he'll be on. So subscribe to the YouTube channel and or follow me on Twitter, and then I'll post about it.
Perfect. So Steph's going to ask that question during her live stream and put them on the spot. Okay. So Steph, we have time for another question. Can we delegate a specific account for centralization view apart from the management account? Maybe just like say the management account of that.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I can only see that.
I'm not sure if you can. If not, then yes, you can. People are commenting, yes, you can.
There you go.
So thank you, Thomas. We're already doing it. Great, that's great to hear. So there you go. That's a great way of doing it, because especially like you can do that with things like stack sets, and we think about moving stuff off to a different account. So if you can do it, if everybody is in the chat telling me you can, then I would really recommend it. The same way as when you do your cost and usage report, we recommend creating a specific account for that, so that it's kind of away from your management account in a separate place, so that those people have full control of it. So maybe export it, make that one an owner, or and then connect it to your cost and usage report there, and then you've got a massive kind of powerful data lake going on.